Afternoon, everyone. This hearing of the Montana Public Service Commission on docket number 2024.03.028 will be back in order. The time is 1:31 p.m. As a reminder for those that weren't here this morning, the purpose of this session is to receive public comments on the petition submitted by various parties asking the commission to initiate rulemaking on consideration of the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. Please be aware that if the commission decides to pursue formal rulemaking, Montana law will require additional notices and process for interested persons to present their views on a proposed rule. This morning, we heard from proponents of the petition. And this afternoon, we have an opportunity for opponents to also be heard. In the interest of fairness and efficient use of our time today, I will call on the proponents in the order they signed up to provide comment. And let me see a show of hand of those in the room that plan to participate and comment as opponents of the petition. Okay, I see 12 in the room and we've got 16 signed up online. We have a 2-hour and 15-minute block allocated for this. That was what was provided for the proponents of the petition this morning. So if you can keep your comments brief and to the point, that would be very helpful to give everybody an opportunity to speak. You're very welcome and encouraged to submit your comments in more detail to the commission in writing if you like. The comment period closes April 12th, so you have through the end of the week to submit written comments at the commission. Okay, I'll just remind those who wish to comment to please speak into the microphone, state and spell your name, and state where you are from. We do not need your physical address, just the town where you live. Please also identify any organization on whose behalf you are speaking, if applicable. And I believe we are ready. And so I will call, one other piece of housekeeping. This morning we had a gentleman that was here who stood up to testify as a proponent, but clearly he was opposed to the content and direction of the petition. So I am ruling Dr. Edwin Berry as an opponent. And it was also clear that he was hearing impaired and misunderstood the proceedings this morning. So I have asked staff to reach out to him and invite him to participate as an opponent if he so chooses. I don't know if he's still here or if he will do that online, but we may hear from Dr. Berry and we will allow time for that. Okay, so by my math, we're going to have about 5 minutes max per person. And if you can keep it under that, then someone who's got more to say might be able to use that time effectively. So if you don't have a lot to say, please don't feel like you need to fill up the entire 5 minutes. And we will start the clock rolling when the first opponent of the petition begins to speak. So I will call up in order and I'll give you the lineup so you know your batting order. So first we're going to have Byron Soipian, and then Kurt Dykema, and then James Taylor, and then Tanner Avery in that order. So I'll just say Byron, please come to the podium.
And I prepare PowerPoint.
Just for those listening online, Mr. Soipian is handing out some materials to the commission before he gets started.
So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all commissioners for inviting me here to speak in front of you. So we'll since I don't have much time, I'll get straight to the point. So the purpose of my talk right now is just to share with you the science behind CO2 and the climate here in Montana and what the data actually tell us, because we at the CO2 Coalition believe that policies should be followed by actual real science. And so first things first, so in slide number 2 that I have here, it shows the historical CO2 levels of Earth from over 100 millions of years ago. And a lot of people are saying, CO2 level today is very high, but in fact, it's very low. As of March 2024, the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere is only about 425 parts per million. But if you look at the data going back hundreds of millions of years ago, which in the second slide, it can be in the order of 1,000 parts per million. And therefore, if you look at throughout Earth's history, today's CO2 concentration is actually very low. And if you go to slide number 3, so this shows the temperature, the annual average maximum temperature in the state of Montana. And what the data indicate is that the modest temperature rise at a rate of 0.02 degrees Fahrenheit per year has actually begun since at least as early as 1895, when the CO2 concentrations were lower back then than they are today. And at a rate of 0.02 degrees Fahrenheit per year, the potential temperature rise by 2050 and 2100 are 0.52 degrees Fahrenheit and 1.52 degrees Fahrenheit, which are smaller than what the petitioners wrote in their petition of 4.5 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050 and 5.6 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100. And the petitioners also said that they are concerned regarding heat waves. Well, I got good news. If you look at slide number 4, it shows the heat wave index in the United States and how it peaked in the year 1936. And so therefore, the heat waves that we are experiencing today are nothing compared to what we've gone through before in the past. And as for Montana, in slide number 5, the graph shows the percentage of days with temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the state of Montana. And once again, we have peak values in the 1930s and in 1980s. And therefore, the hot days that Montana experiences today are small compared to what Montana experienced in the past. So what Montana is experiencing today is not unprecedented. And since we're talking about hot days, let's talk about cold nights. So in slide number 6 shows the data for the percentage of nights with temperatures below 20 degrees Fahrenheit in the state of Montana. And we see that the number of cold nights has been declining over the years. And now here's the thing, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, if you go to slide number 7, slide number 7 shows data from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency regarding the number of days and growing season for the United States and western parts of the United States, and how it deviates from the average value between 1895 to 2020. And the growing season has been growing longer over the years. And as a result, farmers have more planting opportunities with longer growing season, which helps to increase agricultural crop and food production, which I will discuss in greater detail in a later slide. But so the warming is actually a good thing. And in terms of precipitation, again, the petitioners this morning are all concerned about how, the state of Montana is getting droughts or floods, but the data from the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is shown in slide number 8, shows that the annual precipitation in Montana has been fluctuating over the years, but has remained stable overall. So good news, Montana is in no danger of getting inundated or in getting dried up real bad. So that's good news. And if you go to slide number 9, slide number 9 shows the Palmer Drought Severity Index, which estimates the relative soil moisture conditions, where positive values indicate wetter conditions and negative values indicate drier conditions. And what the data indicate is that Montana has had severe droughts in the 1930s and 1980s, and the droughts that Montana is experiencing recently are small compared to what Montana experienced in the past. Now, if you go to slide number 10, now this is another one. So a lot of the petitioners are concerned about snowfall diminishing in Montana, but the good news is the CO2 Coalition has collected data from Montana State University, and data are collected in Kalispell, Montana, which shows that from 1980 to 2023, the amount of snowfall over the years has fluctuated but has remained stable overall. So Montana is in no danger of losing any snow, which is good news for all ski enthusiasts out there. If you go to slide number 11, since the topic of wildlife is also being brought by the petitioners, so the CO2 Coalition has also collected data on wildlife in Montana, where in the graphs on slide 11, the y-axis shows the number of observations, not the population, but number of observations of brown trouts as an example for fish, greater sage grouse as an example for birds, and bison as an example for mammals. And number of observations has been increasing over the years, which means that wildlife in Montana is actually thriving. And in terms of wildfires, the petitioners are also concerned about increasing wildfires, but the data in slide number 12 shows that the number of wildfires and the acres burned by wildfires in the United States, where the number of wildfires are shown in the black curves and the area burned by wildfires is shown on the red curve. So what the data from the National Interagency Fire Center tell us is that the number of wildfires in the United States actually peaked in the 1930s the number of wildfires peaked in 1981, and the current number of wildfires experienced by the United States in 2023 is only 1/5 of that number. And then the area burned by wildfires peaked in the year 1930, and the acres burned by wildfires in the year 2023 is only 5% of the area burned by wildfires in the year 1930. So in other words, the United States has gone through worse wildfires and survived, which is, again, good news for the state of Montana and for the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Soypen. We are at 6.5 minutes now.
Okay,
And we asked for
understood.
about 5 minutes or so. Could you summarize? And we do have your handouts.
Okay.
And they will be reviewed. And you're welcome to submit further comment to summarize if you
Thank
like.
you. So I guess in conclusion, then there is no climate crisis in Montana, and CO2 is actually beneficial because CO2 greens the earth and has been greening Montana, and Montana has had more trees growing over the years. And that's, I guess, if I have to conclude, that's my conclusion.
Okay. And is it safe? I see CO2 Coalition on your slides. Is that who you're representing today?
Yes.
Okay.
And for the record, sorry, I forgot to say this. So my name is Fritz Byron Supian, and the spelling is FRITS BYRONSOEPYAN, and I currently reside in the Woodlands, Texas.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next commenter is Kurt Dykema.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, yes, Kurt, K-U-R-T, Dykema, D-Y-K-E-M-A, from Manhattan. I'm here representing myself and the Association of Gallatin Agricultural Irrigators. We are in opposition to this potential tax on carbon for the simple fact that it will be a pass-through. This will get passed directly on to the consumers. And we don't have a choice, especially in agriculture. When we have to irrigate, we have to turn our pumps on, and that cost will just end up costing us more. We don't have the opportunity to pass costs on like other entities do. So we are opposed simply from an economic standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
James Taylor. And after Mr. Taylor, we have Tanner Avery and then Margaret Door A.
Good afternoon. I'm James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute. The Heartland Institute has members throughout Montana, many of whom have asked that I come and speak with you today on their behalf. You heard this morning from some very well-intentioned people that have some beliefs and fears about climate change. And if those beliefs and fears were true, I would be testifying this morning with the proponents. But fortunately, the facts and the evidence show that the asserted climate crisis does not exist. And for many reasons that it is important for Montana to maintain an abundant mix of energy sources, including coal and natural gas. So this morning, I think we can break down the three objections into energy costs, the health issues, and environmental concerns of the proponents. Regarding energy costs in the economy, we can make projections about saying what is going to be more expensive, but facts speak for themselves. In the United States, there are 17 states that generate more than 25% of their electricity from coal. All 17 states have electricity costs that are below the national average. It's not a coincidence. It's not a conspiracy. Fossil fuels, and particularly coal, are the most abundant, affordable source of electricity generation in this country. Montana's electricity prices are nearly 20% below the national average, largely because 42% of Montana's power comes from coal. Now, throughout the United States, since 2021, there has been almost a 20% increase in wind power generation. At the same time, there's been almost a 20% increase in the cost of electricity prices. That's also not a coincidence, nor is it a conspiracy. Coal power, natural gas power is much more affordable. If we go to renewable energy sources, then the people of Montana are going to pay a price for that. Also, it's important to note that when we have coal plants, when we have natural gas plants, the coal is largely produced here in Montana. The power plants are built here in Montana. The power plants are operated here in Montana. The jobs that are created and maintained are almost entirely in Montana. If we have wind turbines, if we have solar locations, that equipment is produced almost entirely overseas and often in hostile nations. So again, the economic benefits argue for a continuation of a robust energy mix, including coal and natural gas. Health concerns were also raised this morning. I'll note that according to the peer-reviewed scientific literature, approximately 20 times more people die from cold temperatures than die from warm temperatures. Cold kills 20 times more people than heat. So a number of people this morning talked about an increase in heat deaths. Well, there'd have to be about a 20-fold increase in heat deaths to reach the number of cold deaths. With the modest warming that we're getting, we are reducing the largest factor regarding temperature-related deaths, and that's cold deaths. That's a huge number and something to consider for the health concerns of Montanans. Also, when temperatures are cold, this keeps people indoors. People that are indoors do not exercise. Indoor air is much lower quality than outdoor air, even on the worst outdoor air quality days. The modest warmth that we've been getting in Montana throughout the United States has enabled people to be outside walking, jogging, running, playing tennis, golfing, much more than would be the case if temperatures are colder. A warmer climate helps the health condition, the health effects of the American people and Montanans. Finally, environmental concerns were raised this morning. I'll note one thing that I hope you'll keep in mind. You cannot have a climate crisis based on the assertion of global warming when temperatures are unusually cool, not warm. I repeat, you cannot have a climate crisis when temperatures are unusually cool. In my written testimony, you will see documentation of the fact, indeed documentation from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change itself, that throughout most of the time period that human civilization has existed, temperatures have been warmer than today. Temperatures are warming right now from the depths of the Little Ice Age, but it doesn't mean temperatures are unusually warm. There's still much more warming that has to occur before we reach temperatures that humans are used to and that human civilization evolved in. I'll note also that there are many environmental detriments that were not mentioned today. If we're truly concerned about environmental impacts, we should note that wind turbines require a tremendous amount of land usage. Scientists at Harvard University who believe in a climate crisis note that we'd have to cover 1/3 of the American landmass with wind turbines to replace the conventional energy plants that this morning's proponents are opposing. Think about that. If we were to cover 1/3 of Montana with wind turbines, think about the environmental devastation. Not just the development of pristine lands, but also peer-reviewed scientific literature notes that throughout America, literally millions of birds and bats are being killed by wind turbines each and every year.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. That's been about 6.5 minutes also. Could you please wrap up?
Fantastic. I'll finally note that in Montana, Montana generates a small amount of carbon dioxide emissions. The United States emits approximately 14% of the world total. Montana is only 2% of that. Montana's emissions are 0.2% of the world total. If we eliminated all Montana emissions today, it would have a 0.003-degree impact on climate over the next 100 years. In other words, even if there was a climate crisis, still eliminating Montana's emissions would do nothing for that. I've brought with me, and I'll leave for you to examine, Climate at a Glance for Teachers and Students. This book gives 2-page summaries of the topics that were discussed this morning by proponents: hurricanes, wildfires, drought. It shows that those asserted crises do not exist. Also, we have Climate Change in Montana, an assessment that we produced 4 years ago that has Montana-specific climate items. And then finally, Climate Change Reconsidered. This is the summary for policymakers. This is the 700-plus page book that documents all of the benefits from fossil fuels that, again, we'd be missing if we agree with proponents. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Tanner Avery.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. My name is Tanner Avery. It's spelled Avery, and I am from Bozeman, Montana, and I'm the director of the Center for New Frontiers at the Frontier Institute. Today, I am here to discuss 3 reasons why the PSC should reject this petition for rulemaking before you today. Basing rates for electric and natural gas service on the social cost of greenhouse gases calculation, a metric which is both highly controversial and easily manipulatable, amounts to a massive carbon tax on Montana utility customers that will significantly drive up rates for reliable electricity. Significant regulatory decisions like this should be made in the legislature, where there is more opportunity for proper democratic representation, debate, and public input. Secondly, the proposed rulemaking would also require Montana to defer to the federal government in determining social costs. We should not be ceding Montana's authority to set our own climate policy to the federal government bureaucracy. We need to protect our own state sovereignty and ensure state policy is set through the democratic process by Montana's representatives in the state legislature. Lastly, there is no basis in Montana law for what this petition seeks to do. The legislature has clearly and intentionally excluded the PSC from the requirements of MEPA, and therefore the PSC does not do environmental impact analysis. Additionally, the legislature explicitly prohibits the PSC from including speculative environmental costs, such as the social cost of greenhouse gases, in customer rates. MCA 69.3.1206 states the commission may not include a bonus or adder to provide additional compensation for environmental externalities or other costs above avoided costs, except when a bonus or adder is necessary to compensate for a real and actual cost required by existing regulation or existing law. If the petitioners would like the PSC to implement a carbon tax on Montana utility customers through rate making, they should pursue future legislation which would direct the PSC to do so, rather than attempting to run it through the back door via administrative rulemaking. We urge you to say no on this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Margaret Door and then Tom Tanner, Amanda Friel, and Melissa Lewis.
Hi, for the record, my name is Margaret Door, D-O-R-E, and I'm going to be, mine's a little shorter version of what you just heard, more to the point maybe. So I'm here today in strong opposition to the hijacking of the public service.
Ms. Door, please use that microphone so everyone
That's
can
so
hear, especially
hard.
those online.
I'm here today, can you hear me? Okay. I'm here today in strong opposition to the hijacking of the Public Service Commission statute, to have it recreated as something that it's not. The commission is, quote, to consider and act on the information about the climate consequences of its decision, including impacts on communities that are disproportionately harmed by greenhouse gases. That's what the other side is saying, whatever that means. So I think the other person ahead of me did a better job than I'm doing right now. But, you know, if they want to go to the legislature, that's what they should do and get something passed, if that's what's going to happen. But they can't just do it through this organization.
Thank you.
Okay, I was short, less than 6 minutes.
Thank you. You appreciate that. Tom Tanner? And then Amanda Friel, and then Melissa Lewis, and then Amelia Gilsdorf.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Tanner. I'm from Arley, Montana. That's T-O-M-T-A-N-N-E-R. And I'm here representing the Iron Workers International. We oppose the proposed rule changing.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Amanda Friel?
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Amanda Friel, based here in Helena, but speaking today for the Montana AFLCIO, a federation of unions that collectively represents over 50,000 working Montanans, retirees, and their families. And respectfully, today we do rise in opposition to this petition. I think it's important at the front end of this testimony to be really clear about what the proposed rule is about. This rule is not about climate change, whether it's happening or whether it's destructive. We are not here today to dispute that science. What we are here to dispute is who should pay for the cost of climate change. And on that point, we believe this petition fails to promote a just and equitable solution for Montanans, and in particular, our members and working people across the state. Today's proposed rule is a matter of public policy and should take place in a forum that puts all stakeholders at the table. When I looked at the petitioners signed on to this proposal, the group I didn't see are those that represent workers who make a livelihood in these industries. Through our unions, workers have fought hard for corporate accountability, safer workplaces, healthy communities, and yes, cleaner environments. Unions operate under the premise that no one wins unless we all win, and we believe this rule will leave people behind. Montana has a proud history of powering the country, and every system we have built, from profitable industry to how our property tax system is constructed, and by extension, how we fund our local schools, fire departments, and law enforcement agencies, are connected to that history. We have to be honest about how connected our local economies are to the traditional energy sector. If we are serious about finding a path forward, we have to involve every stakeholder in the conversation, in particular those who are on the front lines of these industries. This rule would require the PSC to take into account the social costs of greenhouse gases. We would argue that we must also then take into account the social costs of implementing this rule. And so I wanted to lift up a few of those social costs for your consideration today. This rule will result in massive job loss across Montana. Job loss does not simply affect a family's income. It has far-reaching implications for family stability, including child development, mental health, and even instances of domestic violence and other criminal activities. Individuals who suffer from involuntary job loss are also highly susceptible to depression and other mental illnesses due to the enormous economic strain that accompanies that job loss. That strain also bleeds into other familial relationships, with studies finding that involuntary job loss increases the likelihood of intimate partner and familial violence by a whopping 30%. And according to a study of 1 million laid-off workers in Norway, displaced workers saw a 60% jump in property crime charges a year after downsizing, and a 20% increase in criminal charge rates after a layoff a year after. We also have to consider the impacts to our local and state economies. A recent report found that the fossil fuel industry in Montana accounts for 56,910 total jobs. That includes the 13,740 direct jobs and 43,170 indirect jobs. That accounts for 8% of Montana's total employment. It also provides $3.7 billion in labor income to Montana, 9.8% of the state's total, and contributes $7.5 billion to Montana's total gross domestic product, a whopping 21% of the state's total. Unfortunately, the petition before you today is simply that. It's a petition without a plan. It provides us no answers to how we find equivalent employment for the tens of thousands of workers who would be impacted by massive layoffs, or how we replace the tax base that funds our essential services. We can get to better answers, but we can't do it without centering working people in that conversation. So in closing, I think we need to be candid about what this rule is about and what it actually solves for. You have heard a lot of compelling testimony today about the impacts of climate change. That is not the issue we rose to oppose, and that is not the issue that this rule is ultimately solving for. This rule is about who should pay the cost of climate change. Our contention is that it is not just, and certainly not equitable, for the cost of climate change to be put on the backs of working people. They did not cause this problem and should not be forced to pay the price with their livelihoods, their pensions, and the health of our local economies. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Lewis.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Montana Public Service Commission. My name is Melissa Lewis, and I'm here today to deliver remarks on behalf of the Montana Petroleum Association. MPA represents several hundred hardworking men and women in Montana's petroleum industry, from upstream exploration and production companies to midstream pipeline operators and commodity marketers and downstream refineries. MPA serves Montana's petroleum industry through advocacy, education, and opportunities to network and foster best practices in an ever-changing world. MPA associate members bring a wealth of knowledge to the table to help Montana's oil and gas industry to successfully navigate complex state and federal issues while proactively planning and preparing for the future. Our associate members include Montana engineering firms, environmental consulting firms, boots on the ground contractors, educators, transportation providers, legal and financial professionals, and more. MPA is here today to echo the statements made by those before us and to stress the importance of protecting Montana's good paying jobs as Montana's energy industry transforms. In 2021, the world spent $1.9 trillion in energy investments alone. Bloomberg's Green Energy Research Team estimates in a July 2023 report it could cost more than $196 trillion in additional investments to zero out the world's carbon emissions by 2050. Obviously, we're all contributing to that effort with our federal tax payments, and as you've heard today, Montanans would pay more than $1 billion through additional rates every year for the emissions included under this proposal. MPA respectfully requests that the Montana Public Service Commission takes time before taking action and first determine whether the Montana Public Service Commission has a legal basis to consider climate impacts for their electric and natural gas rates. MPA believes climate regulation is the role of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality and the legislature, and not the Montana Public Service Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're sorry for the interruption. That's a good reminder for all of us not to be that guy. Or gal. Amelia?
Good afternoon. My name is Amelia Gilsdorf. That's Gilsdorf, and I'm here representing the Montana Mining Association. We would just like to echo specifically the points that Mr. Avery made. Costs would be incredibly high for our producers, and electricity is already the largest cost for our producers. So, but additionally, for what Mr. Avery had said about the role of the PSC, and you guys are economic regulators and not environmental regulators. So we would ask that you would have a more democratic process than this one. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And then we have Shannon Heim, George Harris, Adam Haight, and Charles Robeson.
Good afternoon, Chair Fielder, Commissioners. My name is Shannon Heim. I am Vice President and General Counsel at NorthWestern Energy. NorthWestern Energy appreciates the opportunity to provide verbal comments today. We will supplement with detailed written comments by the deadline of Friday, April 12th. Today, NorthWestern Energy serves our Montana electric customers with a portfolio that is derived from 58% carbon-free resources. The nation provides an average of carbon-free generation of about 40%. NorthWestern Energy is starting from a very good position in our commitment to net zero emissions by 2050 for our electric and natural gas operations. If NorthWestern Energy can accelerate that timeline, we will. But we cannot and will not sacrifice our obligation to provide our customers with reliable energy safely at the most affordable rates possible. Dispatchable, long-term, carbon-free resources are being developed, but it will take time for those to be reliable and cost-effective. All generation resources have pros and cons, which is why NorthWestern Energy uses a balanced approach. When the sun is shining and the wind is blowing today in Montana, we actually have more energy than we need to serve our customers. And that excess energy can and is sold on the market to the financial benefit of our customers. Other times, when it's 40 degrees below zero for several days in a row, we need thermal generation resources to provide critical energy services. That's just the reality of energy today. Technology advancements are in progress across the energy, but it will take more time to make those a reality for us in Montana and across the nation. If the petition for rulemaking is accepted, it would result in the commission becoming an environmental regulator instead of the economic regulator of utilities, circumventing the commission's primary purpose to ensure that customers have continued access to energy services that are affordable, reliable, and sustainable for the long term, all contrary to the role the legislature granted it the authority to be. The legislature established the commission to ensure public utilities charge rates that are just and reasonable for its customers. The petition for rulemaking presents complex policy questions that extend far beyond the commission's traditional role as an economic regulator. It is inescapable that the commission cannot consider adopting rules without specific legislative directive. Petitioner's proposal exceeds the grant of authority contained in the current statutes that grant the commission rulemaking authority. NorthWestern respectfully believes that the statutes cited by petitioners do not authorize the commission to propose or adopt rules addressing the impacts of climate change. For example, petitioners urge the commission to propose and adopt a rule that require it to make determinations about the impacts of climate change on decisions related to whether costs incurred by electric and natural gas utilities are just and reasonable. While the legislature has granted the commission authority to adopt rules governing its proceedings in contested cases, setting just and reasonable rates in the Montana Code annotated, nowhere in that part of Title 69 does the legislature specifically and explicitly mention considerations of externalities or impacts of climate change when setting just and reasonable rates. In fact, the legislature does not want the commission to consider externalities in the abstract in setting rates. In 2021, the legislature amended the Montana Code annotated to include a provision that the commission cannot add a bonus or adder for externalities and the cost of a new generation resource unless there are real and actual costs associated with such externalities. Petitioner's proposal stretches well beyond what is permitted under the Montana Administrative Procedures Act. Petitioner's recourse is with the legislature, not the commission. Contrary to the blanket assertions of the petitioners, the Montana Constitution does not afford the commission authority to propose or adopt administrative rules well beyond the scope of its statutory authorization. NorthWestern believes that the petitioner's declaratory ruling requests fail to present questions in which a declaratory ruling is an available administrative remedy. Petitioners are not asking the commission for clarification as to how statutes or rules that the commission implements impact them or their legal rights. Rather, petitioners ask the commission to make legal statements about its authority or obligations, which is inappropriate for a declaratory ruling action. Again, thank you, Chair Fielder and commissioners, for your attention today. We look forward to submitting our comments and additional conversation on these matters. Thank you.
George Harris.
Members of the Public Service Commission, my name is George Harris, Georgeharris. I am the Executive Director of the Montana Coal Council and in the entire coal industry. We appreciate the role that the Public Service Commission has, but in this case, we respectfully oppose the rulemaking petition requiring this commission to consider the impacts of its decisions on environmental and human health, including the impacts of climate change. It is our position that this request is redundant and not only and is not necessary and not under the purview of the Public Service Commission at all. The coal industry is heavily regulated by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Bureau of Land Management, the Federal Offices of Surface Mining and Reclamation and Enforcement, OSMRE, and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. All these regulatory entities have statutory authority to consider coal producers' impact on the environment, including the climate. The mines producing the coal must meet strict DEQ permitting requirements. They then are subject to the OSMRE's federal review of all permitting requirements. Producers must also meet the federal BLM mining requirements. Presently, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality has extensive statewide working groups from all stakeholders reviewing the Montana Environmental Policy Act, which is under the purview of the state legislature and state laws. MEPA is clearly a Montana process, not a regulation. We have heard extensive testimony that the held case mandates DEQ and now PSC to immediately evaluate greenhouse gas climate change in fulfilling their statutory mission and responsibilities and authority. This case is on appeal to the Montana Supreme Court, with the state's position and numerous amicus briefs challenging such strict interpretation. The separation of powers further prevents the court from imposing new legislation or regulation. The legislature creates laws, not the court and not the PSC. The PSC has its own regulatory responsibilities, but clearly regulating climate change and the environment is not one of them. According to United States Energy Information Administration, Montana coal produces 42% of this state's electricity. With that fact in mind, we also, it is critical as a natural resource to this state and to the nation. Montana coal is abundant, affordable, and it is clean. We have 1/3 of the nation's coal reserves, 118.4 billion tons of coal, the largest in the United States. According to the U.S., by 93% in the past 2 decades, making it a clean resource due to millions of dollars of industry investment in clean coal technology. Power plants being built today emit 90% less pollutants than plants replaced from the 70s. That is information from the National Energy Tech Lab. 85% of the coal's electrical grid, of the nation's electrical grid, comes from fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and natural gas. Coal produces over 20% of the national grid of electricity, keeping our lights on, our homes warm in the winter, and cool in the summer. We need all sources of energy, including wind and solar, which is less than 15% and has not moved the needle more than 2% in the last 2 decades. Transition is not our word. It's an evolution, not a transition. Coal is 24/7. It's the most reliable resource in the country and even in the world. The demand for coal is increasing worldwide as well. Coal demand has tripled since the 70s and will continue to grow worldwide for generations to come. Coal is the world's most reliable resource. From an economic perspective, the coal severance tax in Montana has produced $2.4 billion since 1975 of general funds to this state and brings in $65 million a year. Currently, 28 million tons of coal produced each year. Programs throughout this state and communities are benefited from this great resource. We also receive over 890 jobs are directly related to the coal industry, with $100 million of annual payroll. The state presently has over $1 billion in the Coal Trust Fund, which is administered by the legislature and by the Department of Commerce for the benefit of the community throughout Montana and also the citizens to their benefit. The Montana coal industry champions a clean and helpful environment. It will continue to meet state and federal regulations and work with all stakeholders to keep Montana productive and the last best place to live. Montana's coal is not a villain, but rather a superhero. Coal is Montana's ace in the hole. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Haight and then Charles Robison.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Adam Haight, spelled H-A-I-G-H-T, hail here in Helena. I am the business manager for Labor's Local 1686 and the secretary treasurer for the Montana Building and Construction Trades, representing both entities today. We stand in opposition to this proposed rule, which we believe will have severe negative impacts on Montana's energy sector, workers, and our local economies. I have members that work in refineries and power plants across the state, and this will definitely have an impact on their livelihoods. We also believe that this will be a regressive tax that will hurt the most vulnerable Montanans. But even if that were not the case, unfortunately, future social costs are much harder to anticipate, and trying to anticipate a future regulatory requirement or even a consensus opinion based on reported social costs is very difficult. This is further complicated by the fact that renewable energy sources also have an environmental and social cost. As a matter of common sense, we know that energy choices, whether coal, natural gas, nuclear, and even wind and solar, have positives and negatives. Trying to weigh all these factors, as well as construction, operation, and fuel costs, and calculating our best estimates of the regulatory requirements of future social costs is the part of the responsibility to develop a diversified portfolio of power supply resources. This proposal, however, does not weigh all these factors and instead focuses on fossil fuel energy generation via greenhouse gas emissions. We believe this proposed rule is filled with unintended consequences that will cause harm to Montanans, and we ask that it not be implemented. Thank you.
Mr. Chair Fielder, my name is Charles Robinson. I am here on behalf of the Montana Chamber of Commerce and the over 2,000 Montana businesses that ask us to represent them. We urge you to vote against this, not to adopt this proposal. It's really not practicable to quantify this with any real precision. And as others have noted, it's not really the job of the PSC to do so. Frankly, if these proponents want to raise rates on Montana consumers and businesses, we believe they ought to bring the social cost of carbon to the legislature, not the PSC. And raising the cost of electricity will harm all ratepayers. The chamber is especially concerned about low-income Montanans and Montana businesses. This proposal would harm Montana's ability to attract new companies. It would harm the ability to keep companies here in Montana and harm the ability for Montana companies to stay competitive with those in neighboring states. So we urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone that we have on our list for in-person comments. Was there anyone here that we didn't have on the list that wishes to comment in opposition to the petition? Okay. Seeing none, we will now move to the online commenters. You ready? Okay, first we have Gregory Wrightstone.
Good afternoon. I'm Gregory Wrightstone, W-R-I-G-H-T-S-T-O-N-E, a geologist, executive director of the CO2 Coalition. I've been accepted as an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And when institutions of public trust, such as the Public Service Commission, are considering the implementation of far-reaching policies, such as the one being discussed today, it's critically important that all of the best available scientific evidence is considered. Consideration of this proposal must be driven by scientific evidence, not a political agenda. Unfortunately, the individuals and groups that are signatories of this petition are either unaware of or have willfully chosen to ignore the voluminous evidence that's contradictory to their claims of a man-made climate catastrophe due to emissions of greenhouse gases. My colleague Fritz Byron Sapoyan testified just before me an hour ago. His prepared remarks and accompanying written material will be filed later this week. In it, he fully documented that the lengthy list of justifications that the petitioners made for considering adverse impacts from climate change were not supported by science, facts, or data. In fact, the data support that the events alleged to cause harm to our ecosystems and to the human condition are either benign or causing improvements to the very conditions alleged to be in decline. And these include heat waves and extreme high temperatures are not increasing in Montana. Areas burned by fire have declined significantly over the last 100 years. Extreme weather events, including droughts, tornadoes, heat waves, and floods, are not increasing in Montana or globally. Temperature-driven mortality is not increasing in Montana, and significantly more citizens die from cold as from heat. And again, as Dr. Sepoyan testified, snowfall in Montana is not disappearing. But rather than to provide duplicative evidence that there's no ongoing harm to the ecosystems, we should focus on the benefits of carbon dioxide, which we call the miracle molecule, that's being demonized by the petitioners. And those benefits include, a short list is increasing crop growth, increasing soil moisture, shrinking deserts, expanding forests, lengthening growing seasons, and declining cold-related mortality. Likely the greatest benefit from changing climate, increasing CO2, are huge increases in crop production. It's been well documented that more CO2 directly benefits crop growth. Dr. Sepoyan documented some of the good news about Montana agricultural yields, and we're recognizing this globally. Crops of nearly every types are breaking annual production records. The world's remarkable ability to increase food production year after year is attributable to agricultural innovation, CO2 fertilization, CO2-driven drought resistance, warmer weather, and nitrogen fertilizer that's derived from fossil fuels. Data on crop yields confirm that crops are breaking crop growth records year after year, from the coldest countries to the warmest countries. According to the USDA, the most important crop in both Montana and the United States is corn production. And we see just an astronomical growth in corn production over the last 60 years. It has been linked to both warm weather and CO2 fertilization effect. In other words, CO2 increases are driving our ability to feed the growing population. In my short time here, I have only scratched the surface of the huge benefits that our planet's ecosystems and its citizens are experiencing from the combination of modest warming and more CO2. The claims of an ongoing climate crisis in Montana and globally are not supported by the facts. The Montana Public Service Commission should follow the science and reject this petition, as it lacks merit, and the justifications made by the petitioners are not supported by facts, science, or data. Thank you.
Thank you. Benjamin Zeiker? Mr. Zeiker, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, very good. Thank you. My name is Benjamin Zeicher, Z-Y-C-H-E-R. I live in Long Beach, Washington State. I urge the commission to reject the petition in its entirety. First, the petitioners argue that Montana is a significant contributor to anthropogenic climate change. Montana greenhouse gas emissions are about 0.8% of the U.S. total and about 0.1% of the global total. If we apply the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency climate model and assume an elimination of all Montana greenhouse gas emissions, the temperature effect in the year 2100 would be about 38 10,000ths of 1 degree. Second, the petitioners attempt to substitute the Biden administration's social cost of greenhouse gases as a measure of the damage caused by greenhouse gas emissions. It is a fatally flawed concept. It's based upon a future greenhouse gas scenario that is effectively impossible. It is the product of climate models that overstate the actual atmospheric temperature record by a factor of about 2.3. It uses an assumed temperature effect of greenhouse gases that's more than double the estimates reported in the peer-reviewed literature. It ignores the large benefits of rising greenhouse gas concentrations, examples of which are planetary greening, a very large net decrease in combined mortality from heat and cold, longer agricultural productivity seasons, and many others. It uses an incorrect methodology for evaluating the long-term effects of climate policies relative to the short-term effects, and it mischaracterizes the future economic effects of rising greenhouse gas concentrations as projected in the central models used to relate climate trends and economic growth. The petitioners, third, ignore the distinction between natural and man-made influences upon climate phenomena. They assume that everything that happens is caused by man. That is simply not correct, as demonstrated by the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in its published writings and in the peer-reviewed literature. The petitioners misrepresent the findings reported by IPIC in its two most recent assessment reports from 2013 and 2021. IPIC has low confidence in the direction of change for almost all of the climate phenomena that it analyzes. For the few for which IPIC predicts adverse trends with either high or medium confidence, everyone is driven by that same extreme greenhouse gas scenario that I mentioned a moment ago. There is no evidence of a climate crisis in terms of temperatures, sea levels, polar sea ice, tornadoes, tropical cyclones, wildfires, droughts, flooding, ocean alkalinity, and other central climate parameters. I discuss all that in detail in the formal comment that I've already submitted. Six, the petitioners describe renewable energy as clean, but that ignores the heavy metal pollution created by the production processes for wind turbines and solar panels, the large landfill problems created by renewable power, the noise and flicker effects of wind turbines, the toxic metal and disposal problems, the wildlife destruction, the massive and unsightly land use, the serious environmental problems attendant upon a vast expansion of the transmission network, and on and on. Unconventional energy is clean only if we ignore the massive environmental problems created by unconventional energy. Let me conclude as I began. The Commission should reject the petition in its entirety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Zeiker, are you representing an organization?
No, just myself.
Okay, thank you. Travis Fisher, and then we have in order Jeffrey Neer and Shelby DeMars for the next three that will be up. Mr. Fisher?
Good afternoon. Is my audio coming through?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Travis Fisher. I'm the Director of Energy and Environmental Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, which is a nonpartisan think tank in Washington, D.C. It's my pleasure to join you today virtually from the shadow of the partial solar eclipse in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'll be brief and focus on two main arguments put forward in the petition. First is the issue of ripeness. The petition argues that the Held v. Montana ruling at the district court level provides the foundation for a new regulatory rulemaking. However, the Held v. Montana case is not resolved because it awaits final action by the state Supreme Court. Further, the expert testimony relied upon in that court opinion contains serious flaws, and I'm happy to place my critiques of the Jacobson testimony in the written record. Given the uncertain outcome of the Supreme Court proceeding, the PSC should wait for a final court ruling before acting on it. Second, it argues that the federal government's estimates of the social cost of greenhouse gases, such as the social cost of CO2, are suitable tools for the PSC to use in its policymaking processes. That is simply not the case. Even at the federal level, where the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, has consistently declined to apply the social cost of greenhouse gases to judge the significance of those emissions from gas pipeline projects. The social cost of carbon suffers from a whipsaw effect, meaning estimates of its magnitude can swing wildly based on small tweaks to underlying assumptions. And many of those are just arbitrary. So that is why in the short history of the federal government's estimates of the social cost of CO2, estimates have ranged from about $50 per ton under Obama to then less than $10 per ton under Trump, and now $190 per ton or more under Biden. These changes reflect judgment calls more than improvements in science. For example, the two key drivers of changes in the social cost of CO2 are the geographic scope applied, so to choose whether it's US costs or global, and the discount rate. By far, the easiest way to balloon the social cost of CO2 is to use a very low discount rate, implying that costs and benefits impacting people in the year 2300 should be given significant weight. Keep in mind that is 276 years in the future. To try to get a sense of the absurdity of counting costs and benefits that far out, imagine the good people of the British colonies in 1748 trying to calculate optimal CO2 emissions level for people living in the year 2024. Lowering the discount rate from 3% to 2% explains most of the increase in the federal social cost of CO2, from the $50 per ton range to the $190 per ton range. To be clear, this is not updated science. It is a revised judgment call, and it can be repeated over and over again to get even higher estimates of the social cost of CO2. And perhaps that is why the petition calls for using the higher of the EPA estimate or the interagency task force estimate. They seem wise enough to know that these figures can be changed based on political whims. In summary, the framework of the social cost of CO2 is arbitrary and unfit for policymaking at both the federal and state levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Neer or Nur?
Good afternoon, Chair Fielder and Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Neer.
My name is Jeffrey Neer, NEHR, and I'm a Senior Vice President of Corporate Development for Hearthstone Utilities, the corporate parent for Energy West Montana and Cut Bank Gas Company. We appreciate the opportunity to provide the Commission with verbal comments today. We also will be filing written comments by the April 12th deadline. I have 35 years experience in the energy industry, working for Peoples Natural Gas, Hope Gas, EQT Corporation, and Green Mountain Energy. I have developed microgrids at the Pittsburgh International Airport and at a major hospital north of Pittsburgh. I've also worked with Watt fuel cells for residential homes, as well as including fuel cells in the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub fuel cell program. I've worked with renewable gas developments while I was at Peoples Gas for 5 facilities, producing 1 billion cubic feet annually connected to Peoples Gas, and one soon to be connected to our Bangor gas utility in May. Energy West Montana and Cut Bank Gas Company opposes the requested rulemaking. Our gas utility provides safe, reliable, affordable natural gas service to approximately 32,000 customers in Great Falls, Cut Bank, Cascade, and West Yellowstone, Montana. These customers heat their homes and run their businesses assured that natural gas service will not be interrupted even when it's 40 degrees below zero. We believe customer choice regarding their energy needs, diversity in fuel supply, and reliability are critical issues that the petition fails to consider. Natural gas is the most reliable and effective source of energy to heat homes in Montana. Natural gas pipelines are installed 3 feet below ground to not expose gas pipelines to weather conditions that interfere with service. Natural gas is not affected by sun, wind, or water levels, which all impact the availability of renewable energy. Homeowners with natural gas will be safe by having their heat during the winter when low temperatures can create health risks due to hypothermia and home damage caused by freezing water lines. We recently witnessed these type of events and consequences materialize in Texas when freezing weather and lack of electricity to heat homes. Natural gas also supports economic development. Energy-intensive businesses choose to locate in states where energy is abundant and affordable. Energy-sensitive businesses locate in states where natural gas and electric generation are reliable. As businesses locate in states that have energy security, they bring family-sustaining jobs to those states. Their workers pay state and local taxes, and those workers' families support local businesses. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency published information regarding sources of greenhouse gas emissions and their overall impact. Emissions from heating homes are 6%, which are less than the emissions created from agriculture, industry, electric power generation, and transportation. Natural gas can lower emissions in transportation and electric power generation in industry without sacrificing affordability and reliability. Moreover, a robust natural gas industry offers significant opportunities to further reduce emissions through the growing use of renewable natural gas and hydrogen as part of the gas utility supply portfolio, which each offer challenges but also many benefits. Montanans currently have choice for how they heat their homes, power their vehicles, and produce electricity. Almost every home in Montana has electric utility service. Customers currently have the option to install electric heat pumps and buy electric vehicles. The federal government offers significant funding to clean energy and renewable programs, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the long-running investment tax credits for renewables. So why is this proposed rulemaking require mandates so necessary? Shouldn't renewable energy be affordable and widely available by now? Finally, if the commission proceeds with a formal rulemaking in response to the petition, it should ensure that the rules clearly consider and distinguish between gas and electric utilities. Any rules adopted by the commission should not impair the utility's ability to continue to provide access to affordable, reliable, and safe service to its customers. Thank you, Chair Fielder and Commissioners, for your time today.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Shelby DeMars and then Robert Lee, followed by Gordon Olkers, followed by Daniel Brooks.
Hi there, this is Shelby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. My name is Shelby DeMars, and I'm here representing the Montana Association of Oil, Gas, and Coal Counties. We represent 33 of Montana's 56 counties, and all of our member counties have some sort of either oil, gas, or coal development within their counties, and they benefit from those resources. Oil, gas, and coal production is not only important from the standpoint of affordability and reliability, but also for what it contributes to our local communities, our local governments, in terms of both jobs and tax revenue. It should not be overlooked that a large portion of that tax revenue goes directly to support our schools across our state. We believe that the intent behind this rule request seems to be one of two things: either artificially inflating the cost of traditional, reliable energy for consumers, or seeking another potential venue through which to implement a carbon tax without proceeding through the proper legislative channels in an attempt to hedge against a potentially unfavorable outcome to their court proceeding that is currently moving through our judicial process. We find both of these alternatives troubling, and the fact that they would look to try to move this forward through the PSC, which in our view is not the appropriate body for what they are asking, is especially concerning. I've also been asked today to convey the concerns of Rosebud County specifically, who also asked that we emphasize the fact that the agriculture industry, the elderly, and those on fixed incomes will be those that are hurt the most. We are in a period of record inflation, record food costs, record housing costs, and now this request seeks to increase energy costs as well in an attempt to pick winners and losers in the energy market, which we do not think is appropriate. We believe this rulemaking request is extraordinarily regressive, as several others have noted, and will hurt people across the state. We'd encourage the PSC to oppose this rules proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Robert Lee. Okay, Robert Lee is not present online, so we will move on to Gordon Olkers. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Gordon Olkers, OELKERS, Roosevelt County Commissioner, Roosevelt County's northeastern Montana. I have leadership roles in Montana Association of Oil, Gas, and Coal Counties, and I have a leadership position in Montana Association of Counties. We rise in opposition of this new rule. Montana must have a base load. Don't know if that's been stressed enough. We have to have a base load. We have winter. We need that reliable, affordable energy within our base load. So we need to have a balance. We need a balance in renewables. We need a balance in our coal and gas to be used for our base load. I represent on and off reservations where we need reliable, affordable energy costs for both spots, rare earth minerals for renewables. A lot of that comes from countries that are not very friendly. So I feel this will be a consumer-driven solution. New technologies in the private sector will change things for the positive. With that, I thank you for your consideration and rejecting this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have Daniel Brooks, then Travis Jacobson, and then Ellie Brighton.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Dan Brooks. That's Brooks, and I represent the Billings Chamber of Commerce. To start, I want to state our organization's agreement with the view that humanity needs to address global climate change. But this needs to be done at the federal and global level if we hope to have any meaningful impact. We also agree that a cost-benefit analysis is an appropriate tool for decision-making. But we don't believe the selective science of the social cost of greenhouse gas, or SCGHG, is an appropriate cost-benefit tool. First, I think we need to acknowledge that at best, the SCGHG is more art than science. It is riddled with uncertainty, with a litany of assumptions and value judgments, and according to an economist at MIT, is illusory and misleading. In a paper published in the Journal of Economic Literature, Dr. Bob Pindyke at MIT writes, quote, "These models have crucial flaws that make them close to useless as tools for policy analysis," end quote. He continues later, quote, "IAM-based analyses of climate policy create a perception of knowledge and precision, but that perception is illusory and misleading," end quote. I said earlier that the SCGHG may be more art than science, but it may actually be more politics than anything, which brings me to my second point. With consideration for the uncertainty of the SCGHG models, I want to address the portion of the proposed rule before you, page 25 of the petition, under number 1, and within the parentheses there, that would lock in a carbon price floor using the discount rate of 2%. But even in President Biden's interagency working group technical support document, it advises against dismissing the range of potential values from different discount rates. On page 4 of that technical support document, quote, "For purposes of capturing uncertainty around the SCGHG, estimates and analyses, the IWG emphasized previously and reemphasizes here the importance of considering all 4 of the SCGHG values," end quote. And there they are referring, of course, to the varying discount rates of which one of our commenters talked about earlier, and also result in a wide range of outcomes. However, the proposed rule before you seeks to dictate a prescribed outcome, making it less about accuracy and more about activism. Members of the commission, I'll end with this. Montana doesn't need a political regulatory tool that locks you into unscientific decisions, because the truth is Montana is already doing its part to address climate change. With numerous renewable projects coming online, natural gas providing a cleaner fuel than coal, and massive electric generation from hydro, our state's CO2 emissions have been declining since 2007. Implementing a new social cost of carbon regulation to be borne by our businesses and residents is unnecessary. Thank you for your time and consideration of my comments.
Thank you. Travis Jacobson.
Good afternoon, President Fielder and Commissioners. My name is Travis Jacobson, and I serve as the Director of Regulatory Affairs at Montana Dakota Utilities Company, and I live in Bismarck, North Dakota. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. We also plan to file written comments later this week. As you know, Montana Dakota is a multi-segment, multi-jurisdictional utility. Montana Dakota operates an integrated electric utility that serves a portion of Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota with an owned generation portfolio consisting of 34% carbon-free resources, and 20% of the company's generation in 2023 consisted of renewable resources. Recently, 3 coal units were operated and were recently retired because they were aging and no longer efficient. On the gas side of the business, we operate an integrated gas utility that also serves a portion of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Montana, Dakota's most pressing concerns are number one, imposing the rule in dockets regarding rate making, avoided cost calculations, and the issuance of debt or securities would be a substantial departure from well-established commission precedents and likely violate state law. Number two, amending the commission's recently adopted resource planning rules after years of comments and work, and while the legislature has an ongoing review of the planning process, is inappropriate. The proposed rule suggests the numerical standard for estimating the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions, but does not indicate how this standard would be applied in the commission's considerations in light of the statutory prohibition on considering anything other than real or actual costs. We are concerned this will add unnecessary complexity and irrelevant issues to regulatory proceedings, which will not advance the petitioner's goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy consumption. By way of example, Montana Dakota regularly seeks approval from the Commission to issue debt instruments in order to provide additional debt capital to maintain the capital structure preferred by its regulators and to finance ongoing capital and operational needs. Adoption of the proposed rules and introducing the greenhouse gas cost analysis into these proceedings will increase the costs and complexity of these regulatory proceedings without any clear benefit to be gained. Montana Dakota is also concerned about any change which would require it to conduct a materially different resource planning process for Montana than it conducts for the rest of its integrated multi-state system. Specifically, North Dakota law prohibits the consideration of numerical values for environmental externalities in planning or rate setting. As a result, the proposed standard would likely require Montana Dakota to conduct a separate resource planning process for Montana, thereby increasing costs. Finally, Montana Dakota is concerned that the proposed rule elevates the estimated social cost of greenhouse gases over all other considerations. The final statement indicates that renewable must be given preference, and I'll quote, if the adverse impacts resulting from the use of fossil fuels are larger than those from renewable energy production, end quote. Under this statement, the relative impact on greenhouse gas emissions could be the sole consideration and would not permit the type of fulsome comparison of resource options which utilities typically consider, including capacity, reliability, actual costs, and environmental compliance. For these reasons, Montana Dakota requests the Commission deny the petition for rulemaking or any other efforts to incorporate an environmental externalities calculation until the legislature completes its resource planning review and has had an opportunity to act on the interim recommendations. That concludes my comments, and once again, I appreciate the opportunity to present today.
Thank you. Next up, we will have Ellie Brighton, and then Jeff Cheetah, then Mayor John Williams, and then followed by some of our state representatives and senators. So in the queue, Ellie Brighton.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. My name is Ellie Brighton, spelled Brighton. And I am here on behalf of the Montana Stock Growers Association. Since 1884, the Montana Stock Growers Association has worked to promote the livestock industry, adding value to the economy, communities, and providing a safe and affordable product for consumers. More recently, MSGA has increased focus on protecting ranchers across the state of Montana from undue burden and regulatory overreach. The current petition directive of a carbon tax on utility customers is regulatory overreach with severe financial implications for livestock producers in Montana. The PSC lacks a legal basis to consider climate impacts for electric and natural gas rates because it is an economic and not an environmental regulator. Climate regulation is the role of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality and the Montana legislature more broadly, who specifically exempted the PSC from the Montana Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA. Under a PSC carbon tax, rates for reliable electricity will skyrocket. Montanans will pay an additional $2 billion through rates every year for the emissions from just one Montana generating source. Mandating that the PSC incorporate the social cost of greenhouse gases artificially increases the cost of these indispensable resources and drives up energy costs statewide. Livestock production requires energy for multiple facets of daily operations. Electricity is utilized by producers to pump stock water as well as irrigation water, keep barns well lit and warm, especially during winter calving, and for a myriad of other necessary operational activities. As representatives of the Montana livestock industry, we continue to see an increase in the cost of operating alongside the increase in overregulation. A carbon tax such as this would be forced to be passed down to consumers, livestock producers being a significant percentage of those consumers. With shrinking margins, a tax such as this serves only to harm the industry and the livelihood of those who depend on it. Montana Stock Growers opposes this rulemaking petition, and we ask the Commission to no longer consider it for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Cheetah. Mr. Cheetah, you're mute. Okay, I think we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Jeff Cheetah, spelled Jeffftschida. I reside in Polson and speak here today on my own behalf, but hopefully on behalf of the typical Montanan as well. I oppose the petition under consideration by the Commission today for 3 reasons. First, the petition contains an immense amount of ambiguity, specifically the rule and the 2 declarations the petitioners seek all suffer from a lack of clarity and feasibility. They make a host of vague and often conflicting assertions that render them open to a wide range of different legal interpretations. Just one small example. What does it mean to prevent constitutional harm? What exactly constitutes, quote, constitutional harm, unquote? Bring on the lawsuits. Second, the so-called climate science described in the petition suffers from flaws, if not outright lies, that render it irrelevant. The petition uses IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Annual Report 6, AR6, as a fundamental basis for its arguments. However, AR6 suffers from a critical flaw. It uses RCP 8.5, the IPCC's most catastrophic climate scenario, as its sole baseline scenario. The low and medium baselines from previous reports did not make it into this report. And AR6 itself says, quote, high-end scenarios like RCP 8.5 are not typical business as usual projections and therefore should not be presented as such, unquote. Yet the petitioners have done just the opposite by exclusively using the RCP 8.5 results and only those results to justify its demands. They have done exactly the opposite of what AR6 says they should do. One proponent stated that a large number of people die from excessive heat each year. This is true. However, she neglected to mention that an estimated 9 times more people around the world die from cold than heat. Not to make too fine a point, it gets cold in Montana in the winter. Montanans need the energy to protect themselves from that cold. Another proponent stated that climate change has increased the number and severity of environmental disasters around the world. This is not true. Multiple studies show that the number and severity of environmental disasters have not increased over the last 100 years, but instead have remained relatively constant. Third, the proposed rule and declarations would adversely affect the lives of most Montanans. Montana has an immediate need to augment the unpredictable and intermittent nature of both wind and solar generation. which fluctuates greatly and very unpredictably due to a wide range of weather conditions. Montana needs a baseload capability, as others have said, that can fill the electrical power gaps created by these fluctuations. Current technology can generate a consistently reliable baseload capability in only 3 ways: hydro, nuclear, and hydrocarbons. Montana has already maxed out the capabilities of its hydro resources. The current political climate in Montana will not allow even the discussion of, let alone implementation of, nuclear generation. This leaves hydrocarbons as the only remaining source of reliable baseload electrical generation. The Yellowstone County Station will generate up to 175 megawatts of electricity using approximately 10 acres of land already owned by NorthWestern Energy. To generate this amount of electricity using solar panels would require at least 1,700 acres of land, 170 times the amount of land that the Yellowstone County Station sits on. Further, per megawatt of generating capacity, the average solar plant uses approximately 6 times more metals and materials than the average natural gas power plant. Even worse, the average onshore wind power plant uses approximately 9 times more metals and materials than the average natural gas power plant. Thus, both wind and solar require mining that would impact the environment by a factor of 6 to 9 times more than the existing Yellowstone County Station. No sane person would support 6 to 9 times more adverse environmental impact with absolutely no additional benefit. Additionally, NorthWestern projects that the Yellowstone County Station has cost around $300 million. An equivalently sized solar plant would cost Montana consumers a minimum of $1.8 billion, and an equivalent wind plant would cost a minimum of $2.7 billion. And these are minimum costs. Just imagine what these costs would do to a Montana electricity prices. But we don't have to imagine. In 2010, Germany committed to their so-called green energy Wende effort. Today, in 2024, after 14 years of so-called green energy, Germans burn more wood and lignite, the dirtiest form of coal, far dirtier than our coal, than ever before in their history. More importantly, they also release more carbon than ever before. This is after 14 years. In addition, Germany's green goals have decimated their industrial base with sky-high electricity prices. Germans now pay 9 times more on average than Americans do for electricity. In our own country, Californians currently pay an average of 5 times more than Montanans do, only to generate more carbon with less reliability than ever before. Montanans do not want to pay $1 a kilowatt hour for electricity, all the while emitting more carbon. The petitioners will tell you they have the settled science on their side. They do not. Settled science is not science. It is dogma. Pseudo-religious, Gnostic, neo-Marxist dogma. I'll end with this. My house in Polson sits on a site where an estimated 4,000 feet of glacial ice sat 15,000 years ago. Why did that ice melt? No one knows, and the current climate models can't tell us. The oceans of 15,000 years ago sat an estimated 120 meters, 400 feet lower than they sit today. Somehow those Neolithic humans of 15,000 years ago, with only primitive tools, managed to not only survive but thrive. Yet today the petitioners tell us that we, ultra-sophisticated humans of the 21st century, with all our tools and technology, are threatened by a few potential inches of sea level increase. That doesn't make sense, and neither do the demands of this petition. For all these reasons, I recommend the petition does not accept, or the commission does not accept the vague, undemocratic, politically driven, and error-ridden demands of the petitioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor John Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name is John Williams. Williams. I'm the mayor of the city of Colstrip, and I've been in service with the city for 25 years. Prior to that time, I spent 34 years with Montana Power Company, and I very strongly oppose the petition that has been prepared to address climate change concerns. And I emphasize the word concerns with a carbon tax. As mayor, one of the issues that I continually deal with is the supply of clean, affordable, reliable, safe water and sewer services to the community, to residents of the community of Colstrip. One of the largest ongoing costs that we have to provide this service is electricity. It impacts all of our residents within the community. And I have a responsibility, and I share that with the commissioners, to maintain a safe, reasonable costs associated with that service that I provide as a city mayor. So I ask you to oppose this petition that's been prepared, that's presented to you, and I thank you for the opportunity to supply my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Next up, we will have State Representative Gary Perry, and then he will be followed by former State Senator Dwayne Ankney, if he's available. Apparently, he had some problems with his technology or his power at his home this morning, so he may not be able to appear. And then Senator Barry Usher. So, Representative Perry, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can.
My name is Gary Perry, spelled P-A-R-R-Y, and I represent House District 39. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. However, it is my opinion that this hearing should not even be taking place. It's a waste of Montana resources and an unnecessary cost to our citizens. The Montana legislature specifically exempted the PSC from MEPA exacting in anticipation of this type of backdoor maneuvering. This is a policy issue and is reserved to the legislature as the voice of the majority of the people of Montana, except when the judiciary chooses to play partisan politics and legislate from the bench. The legislature has been very clear that the PSC is prohibited from even considering the inclusion of speculative costs such as greenhouse gases as a cost to the customer rates of Montanans. Referring to MCA 69-3-1206, it is clearly stated that the commission may not include a bonus or adder to provide additional compensation for environmental externalities. This hearing represents a significant extension of the Public Service Commission's authority. That being said, these anti-coal and anti-natural gas groups are working to jeopardize the overall safety and health of our poorest Montanans by imposing such an onerous, regressive tax that will seriously harm the poor who already struggle to pay for the real cost of energy to avoid freezing to death without adding costs for socially established costs for not yet universally verifiable and quantifiable items. Additionally, the real issue here is the fact that these groups are working to eliminate the availability of reliable energy sources, which will result in jeopardizing the lives of our citizens as severe weather events occur. We experienced this in January, and the entire Northwest is grateful that our coal plants prevented the entire grid from collapsing. Efforts like this are specifically designed to circumvent the proper processes by going around the majority of the Montanans by working to subvert the democratic process and the people elected to represent the citizens of Montana. Do these groups believe the majority of the people of Montana should be ignored? Playing political games with the safety and livelihoods of Montanans is inexcusable. Let's work to find additional sources of reliable generation rather than attack the affordability of our people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is Senator Ankney online? Dwayne Ankney? Okay, we don't see him there. So Senator Barry Usher.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm Senator Barry Usher, USHER. I represent Senate District 20, which Includes everything in northern and eastern Yellowstone County, Muscle County, Treasure County, Rosebud County, and parts of Custer County. I am a opponent of this rule. If this rule is implemented, it would effectively institute a $190 per ton carbon tax on electricity sources that will be passed on to the customers. The 40 environmental groups behind this rule are not looking out for our customers. They're trying to pick winners and losers in the energy market by implementing rules that are punitive towards our reliable and affordable energy sources like coal, oil, and gas. My district, the energy producers in it, and the individuals whose jobs and families rely on good paying jobs our energy industry provides will be disproportionately impacted by these rules that are out of the scope of the PSC's jurisdiction as a rate setting entity. The question of whether or not to implement a carbon tax is a policy question that should be ultimately handled by the legislature. The legislature explicitly prohibits the PSC from including speculative environmental costs such as social costs of greenhouse gases in their customer rates. For those reasons, I am opposed to this rule implementation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That is everyone we had on our list for online comment. Is there anybody left online, Philip? Nope. Not that we can see. Okay. Seeing none, are there any other persons in the room that we missed that would like to testify? Please come forward to the lectern, state your name and the organization you represent if you do represent one, and please spell your name for the record as well.
Yes, thank you. But is it on? Madam Chairman, members of the commission, I apologize I got here late. My name is John Iverson. That's Iverson, and I represent the Treasure State Resources Association. The Treasure State Resources Association is a broad coalition of businesses, recreation groups, and other associations, as well as organized labor in Montana. We have grave concern with the petition before you today. It has to do with the affordability and the reliability of the system. Not to beat a dead horse, but there are so many businesses in Montana that are able to make a go at it because we have affordable, reliable power. And if we were to implement a carbon tax, that is going to directly impact those businesses' ability to continue to remain in Montana. And so for those reasons, we oppose this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further commenters that have not had an opportunity to comment yet today? Okay, we're going to recess for just a moment while I confer with my colleagues. Okay, that concludes the comment period for the opponents of the petition. Thank you for being mindful of the time. I apologize that I had to cut a couple people short, but trying to manage the time necessitated trying to give some advice about limits. Next, we have a period set up for informational witnesses, if there are any that are not, that are here to just provide information. This would not include any opponents or proponents of the petition, just informational witnesses. Do we have any informational witnesses who wish to comment? Any informational witnesses that wish to comment? Seeing none in the room, are there any online? Okay, we're seeing no informational witness. So I'd like to thank all of the people who commented this afternoon for being respectful and helping this body to maintain a civil process. And we do appreciate everybody's cooperation with that throughout the day today. I want to remind everybody before we adjourn that the commission will continue to accept comment in writing and by phone. up until April 12th, 2024 through the end of day, April 12th, 2024. You may provide public comment by calling the Public Service Commission at 1-800-646-6150 or email the commission at pschelp@mt.gov. That's pschelp@mt.gov. Please remember that that deadline is end of business day, April 12th, 2024. Technically, we'll accept them until the end of the day, which is midnight, midnight, April 12th. Okay. Gives you a little bit of extra time. All right. Thank you for your comments today. The time is now 3:10 p.m. and this hearing is now adjourned.